The Witch's Hunger Part 2. Chapter 13, The Hollow Below. The moment Tobias crossed the threshold of the hollow tree, the world changed. The mist outside muted. The temperature dropped to a bone-deep cold that gnawed at his skin. It felt like falling into the marrow of the earth. The flashlight's beam barely cut the darkness. Shadows clung to the inner walls of the tree, walls that pulsed faintly as if breathing. The tunnel spiraled downward. Not carved, but grown, as if the roots themselves had twisted in obedience to some ancient command. Every few feet, Tobias spotted faint etchings scratched into the wood. Eyes sewn shut. Mouths open in silent screams. Moons weeping thorns. The deeper they went, the older the symbols became, less human, more primal. Older than the Calder bloodline. Older, perhaps, than language itself. They descended in silence for what felt like hours. The only sound was the faint drip of water from above and the slow, relentless beat of something living in the walls. Finally, the spiral opened into a cavern. It was not natural. Roots formed the ceiling, twisting into spires that arched overhead like the ribs of some ancient, dead god. The ground was smooth, stone-hard, and etched with a massive spiral pattern, leading toward a shallow basin in the center. Above the basin, suspended by roots and chains of black iron, hung a cage. And inside the cage, a woman. At first, Tobias thought she was dead. She hung limply, hair a tangle of silver and black, body wrapped in tattered rags. But as he stepped closer, she stirred. Her head lifted. And two bright, fierce eyes locked onto him. Edith Calder. You took your time, she rasped, her voice raw and cracking. Tobias froze. He had 1,000 questions. 1,000 warnings clawing to be spoken. But all he could say was, "You're alive." Edith barked a short, bitter laugh. "No," she said. "Not really. Not the way you mean." She rattled the chains lightly. "I'm what happens when you bargain halfway with hunger." Lena moved to Tobias's side, staring up at Edith with horror and awe. "What do you mean?" Lena asked. Edith's eyes softened, just slightly. "I ran when I was 17. Refused the offering. Refused to sign the ledger. But the witch doesn't forget." She leaned closer to the bars, the chains creaking. "She found me anyway." Tobias swallowed hard. "Then how are you still here?" Edith smiled grimly. "I offered her something she hadn't tasted in centuries, my memory of myself." She gestured to the roots around her. "My name. My lineage. My place. All carved away, piece by piece. I exist only in the hollow now. Neither fed nor free." Tobias staggered back. The realization hit like a hammer. Edith hadn't survived. She had become a relic. A part of Stonewood Hollow itself. Bound. Forgotten. Alive only in the way a cursed object lives. "You came for answers," Edith said, her voice sharpening. "And I'll give them." She gripped the bars. "But know this," her eyes blazed. "Knowledge does not come without appetite." The spiral at their feet began to glow faintly, crimson light bleeding upward from the cracks. The heartbeat in the walls quickened. The witch was stirring. "You want to sever the bloodline?" Edith asked, voice trembling not with fear, but with fury. "You want to starve the hunger?" She smiled, teeth sharp. "You'll have to give her something she's never been offered." Lena stepped forward. "What?" Edith's smile widened. "A soul that refuses to be remembered." The light flared. The spiral of roots under their feet shuddered. The hunger was aware of them now. And growing restless. Tobias clenched his fists. He had come seeking answers. But he realized now, the answer was a price. And the hollow itself was hungry for a bargain. Chapter 14, The Ritual of the Nameless. The spiral beneath Tobias and Lena's feet throbbed with a dim, blood-colored light, tracing the ancient symbol outward toward the hollowed walls. The heartbeat was no longer faint. It pounded in the stone. In the roots. In Tobias's own chest. Time was running out. Edith Calder clutched the iron bars of her cage. Her presence seemed both terribly human and not human at all. Her voice, when she spoke, felt like it came from somewhere older than her own body. "You want to break the hunger's hold?" she rasped, leaning closer. "Not delay it. Not feed it scraps. Not beg it for mercy." Tobias nodded, fists clenched. Lena didn't speak, but she stepped forward, closer to the glowing spiral, her face grim with determination. Edith's eyes gleamed in the dark. "There's only one way," she said. "You must offer her something she cannot consume." Tobias frowned. "You said a soul that refuses to be remembered." Edith nodded. "A soul without a name. Without ties. Without a memory to devour. Something she can't digest, because it doesn't exist the way others do." Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "How?" Edith's fingers tightened on the cage bars until they creaked. "You must perform the ritual of the nameless." She gestured toward the basin at the center of the cavern. "The basin is old. Older than Stonewood Hollow. Older than the Calder blood. It can erase a soul, not kill it, not destroy it, but strip it clean." Tobias stared at the basin. A shallow, cracked bowl hewn from black stone. It looked empty from here, but somehow he knew, it wasn't. It was waiting. "The one who steps into the basin," Edith said, voice low and deadly serious, "must willingly give up everything they were." She rattled the chains again for emphasis. "No name. No family. No past. No dreams. Not even memory of their own face." Her lips curled into a snarl. "If you succeed, if you become truly nameless, the witch cannot feed. She cannot hold you. You become a gap in her hunger." She leaned closer. "And if there's enough emptiness in you, it can collapse her." Tobias's throat was dry. "Collapse?" Edith nodded slowly. "She needs names. Needs memories to tether herself to this world. Break her chains, and she folds back into the hollow. Into silence. Maybe not forever. But long enough to end her hold on the Calder line." Lena stepped forward, voice shaking. "And if we fail?" Edith smiled, a horrible, pitying thing. "Then you die hollow. Soulless. And worse, her voice dropped to a whisper. You become part of her." Silence filled the cavern. The heartbeat of the hollow pressed against Tobias's ears, making the decision impossible to ignore. Offer memory. Offer self. Offer everything. Tobias turned to Lena. "You don't have to," he said. "I can," but Lena shook her head firmly. "No. We do this together." Her voice was steady now. For the first time since the hunger had started whispering in her mind, Tobias saw the old Lena, brave, stubborn, full of impossible hope. "I won't let it end with us feeding her," she said. "Not again." Together, they approached the basin. The spiral of symbols brightened with each step, casting their faces in flickering crimson light. The basin was indeed full. Not of water. Not of blood. But of memories. Whispers curled from it, fragments of laughter, screams, lullabies, shouted prayers. All the offerings from centuries of victims. Tobias reached into his pocket and touched the cracked journal. It trembled in his hand. The last tether to his past. The names, the history, the line of blood that had bound him to a curse he never chose. Edith's voice came one last time, harsh and urgent. Once you step in, there is no going back. She pressed her palm against the cage bars, and for the first time Tobias noticed. There was a brand on her hand. 3 crescent moons. Chained by thorns. Lena and Tobias looked at each other. One nod. One breath. Then, together, they stepped into the basin. The memories struck like a tidal wave. His mother's voice singing by the fireplace. Lena laughing on a summer day, ice cream melting down her hand. The smell of old books in the Calder library. His father's angry shouts. A girl he once loved. A secret wish made at the age of 12, forgotten until now. One by one, they were pulled from him. Siphoned into the hollow. He tried to hold on. Tried to remember. Tried to be Tobias Calder. But the basin demanded everything. Lena's hand gripped his fiercely. Through the flooding memories, through the rising darkness, they held on. Not to identity. Not to the past. But to a choice. To not be devoured. The witch's scream filled the hollow. A sound of rage. Of hunger denied. Of chains snapping. The ground split open. The cavern cracked apart. And the basin swallowed their names. Chapter 15, Hunger Hates an Empty Plate. The world reeled. Tobias, or whoever he had been, staggered out of the basin, the stone warm beneath his bare feet. No memories. No name. No tether. Beside him, the girl, the woman, he once knew as Lena stumbled forward too, her fingers still clutching his, though neither could remember why. There was no history between them now. Only instinct. Only resolve. The hollow had changed. The heartbeat was gone, replaced by a deep, sucking silence, as if the earth itself was inhaling. Roots curled away from their feet, recoiling as if from a fire. Symbols etched into the stone walls flickered like dying embers. The spiral at the basin's center shivered. From the far end of the cavern, something peeled itself from the walls. It was not the witch as they had seen her before, cloaked and hidden. This was the hunger incarnate. It dragged itself forward, a thing of tangled limbs and teeth stitched into bark, wearing a dozen stolen faces that flickered and wept along its surface. A child crying. A woman screaming. An old man laughing hollowly. All the stolen memories made flesh. All the promises of hunger fulfilled. It towered above them, filling the cavern with the scent of rot and bitter herbs. Its head twisted slowly, seeking. Searching. But it couldn't find them. They stood still. Breathless. Nameless. The hunger shrieked, a horrible, bone-deep sound of denial. It hurled itself at them. Faster than thought. Teeth flashing. Hands like broken claws outstretched to grasp, to anchor, to devour. But when it struck, it missed. The girl and the boy were no longer names to be claimed. They were gaps in the world. Holes in the tapestry the witch had fed upon for centuries. The hunger writhed in the air, its faces distorting, splitting apart in frustration. Around the cavern, the petrified trees moaned and splintered. The spiral cracked, leaking light that burned like pale fire. The boy, the one who had once been Tobias, stepped forward. No longer trembling. He understood now. You could not fight the hunger with strength. You could not run from it. You had to be nothing it could latch onto. The girl, the one who had once been Lena, moved with him. Together, they circled the hunger, each step pulling its desperate, clawing attention, confusing it further. Every time it lunged, it met emptiness. Every time it roared, it swallowed air. It was starving. Not for flesh. Not for souls. But for meaning. The hunger tried to create new memories. It spat images into the air. A mother's lullaby. A child's laughter. A lover's whispered promises. They hung like mist, dazzling and golden. Bait. Lures. But the boy and girl saw nothing in them. No ache. No desire. Only illusions. They walked through them as if through fog. Untouched. The hunger howled. It reared back, collapsing into itself, layers of stolen faces peeling away like burning paper. The cavern trembled. The roots above them convulsed. Stone shattered at the seams. And from somewhere deep inside the spiral, a voice rose. The nameless do not feed the hollow. The nameless starve the world of hunger. The final act had begun. The hunger, realizing it could not consume, could not bind, had one choice left. To tear itself apart or vanish into silence. The boy and girl clasped hands. Without speaking. Without remembering. Only being. Together, they stepped into the center of the spiral. Light rose up around them, pure, blinding, scouring. The hunger shrieked, a sound that shook the stone to dust. And then. Silence. Not just the end of a sound. The end of a presence. The end of a long, terrible, desperate hunger that had been gnawing at the Calder line for centuries. Gone. The basin cracked down the center with a thunderous crack. The cavern collapsed inward. The hollow folded into itself like a dying star. And Tobias and Lena, or the pieces of them that remained, were thrown upward in a flash of blinding white, into the world above. Chapter 16, The Hollow World Above. The boy awoke first. He lay on cracked stone, cold against his back, with mist curling in slow, ghostly eddies above him. The trees overhead were skeletal, blackened spires reaching into a sky washed clean of stars. The world was silent. Not dead. Just still. As if the earth itself was holding its breath. He sat up slowly. Pain radiated from every joint, but it was dull, distant, like echoes from a life that might have belonged to someone else. He looked at his hands. They were rough. Scarred. Familiar. But the memories attached to them were missing. He flexed his fingers, trying to summon something, an image, a feeling, a name. Nothing came. Not even sorrow. A few feet away, the girl stirred. She pushed herself upright, brushing dust from her clothes. Her hair clung to her face in tangled strands. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two souls. No past. No promises. No names. Around them, Stonewood Hollow lay in ruins. The petrified trees had splintered. The cracked cobblestone paths were crumbling into the earth. The dead town had collapsed inward, as if the very roots that fed it had been severed. And above it all, the sky shivered, a thin gray wash without sun or moon. An unfinished canvas. Waiting for new stories to be painted. The boy stood and helped the girl to her feet. Neither spoke. Words were anchors to things they no longer possessed. Instead, they simply moved. Together. Following some unseen pull that had survived even when memories had not. They wandered through the hollow town. Past the dry fountain. Past the broken church steeple. The carvings, eyes, mouths, moons, had all faded to cracks. The hunger was gone. They had torn its name from the world. No more offerings. No more thrones made of thorns. No more whispered bargains in the dark. But something else had been lost, too. The weight of belonging. Of knowing who they had been. The boy found a cracked window and looked at his reflection. It stared back. Curious. Empty. Unburdened. Was this freedom? Or was this simply being hollow? The girl touched his arm. She pointed down the overgrown road leading away from the ruins. The way out. There was nothing keeping them here anymore. Nothing except dust and the memories of people neither of them could recall. They turned away from Stonewood Hollow. And walked. Step by step. Into the unknown. As they passed the border of the hollow, the mist began to lift. The trees grew greener. The earth less broken. In the distance, the faint silhouette of a town glimmered beneath the early gray of dawn. Normal. Whole. Alive. The boy felt a pull. The same instinct that had guided him to the girl in the basin. The same instinct that had made him fight against the hunger even when he didn't remember why. Hope. Not memory. Hope. A seed planted deeper than even the witch's curse could reach. Without a word, he offered his hand. The girl hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then placed her hand in his. Together, they crossed into the light. Behind them, far back in the shuddering bones of Stonewood Hollow, something deep underground shifted. Not the hunger. Not the witch. But the memory of a memory. A name long forgotten. A whisper so faint it barely stirred the dust. Tobias. Lena. But the boy and girl heard nothing. They walked on. Free. For now. Chapter 17, The Town That Knows Their Names. The road uncoiled like a silver ribbon beneath their feet. Ahead, a small town emerged, humble, quiet, tucked between sloping green hills. It looked untouched by curses or hunger. A world of front porches, laundry lines, creaking weather vanes, and the gentle rhythm of wind chimes. A place that belonged to someone. Just not to them. Not yet. They entered the town just after sunrise. No one stopped them. No one stared. Yet eyes followed them from curtained windows. The boy noticed it first, a peculiar stillness in every glance. Not suspicion. Not curiosity. Recognition. They checked into a small roadside inn run by an elderly woman with storm-gray hair and warm hands. "You two look like you've walked a long way," she said kindly. The boy nodded. "We don't remember where from." She paused, then smiled, soft and sad. "That's all right. Sometimes forgetting is its own kind of mercy." They stayed 2 nights. Tried to rest. Tried to be normal. The innkeeper never asked for names. But every receipt they received, every cafe order, every folded laundry slip, had 2 words scrawled in ink at the top corner. Tobias, Lena. They didn't remember giving them. They didn't even remember knowing them. But there they were. Over and over. On the 3rd morning, the boy opened the dresser drawer in their room and found an old photograph lying beneath a pile of folded towels. It was a picture of a woman. Familiar. Young, wild-eyed, with a streak of silver in her hair. She stood in front of a black tree, smiling. The girl, the one who had been Lena, picked it up. Held it like something sacred. "I know her," she whispered. And she did. Somehow. Edith Calder. That night, they sat in silence on the edge of their borrowed bed. The streetlights outside flickered like candle flames in the dark. The town slept. But the walls remembered. So did the mirrors. In the bathroom, the boy caught his reflection shifting, just a blink, just a flicker, but the eyes that stared back were older than his own. And carved faintly into the steamed mirror was a symbol. 3 crescent moons. Chained by thorns. He wiped it away. But it reappeared again. And again. By dawn, the whispers returned. Not from the hollow. Not from the witch. But from the world around them. Old things calling back what had been taken. Clocks that ticked backward when they entered the room. Music boxes that played songs they almost remembered. A child in the street calling her doll, Lena, over and over until it sounded like a curse. The curse was dead. But its residue was not. And somewhere in the gap between forgetting and being forgotten, something was beginning to stir, to rebuild what was broken. Not the hunger, but the echo of what fed it. Chapter 18, The Memory Collector. By the 4th day in the town, the whispers grew stronger. Tobias and Lena, though they didn't call themselves that, felt the weight of unseen eyes more heavily with every hour. Street lamps flickered when they passed. Shadows deepened behind shop windows. Even the trees seemed to lean closer, their bare branches scratching secret messages into the air. It was on that gray afternoon, while sitting in a forgotten corner of the town's aging park, that he appeared. A man in a long, worn coat the color of old parchment. He carried a leather satchel stitched with thread that shimmered faintly, almost metallic, when the light caught it. His face was pale, sharp-featured, but somehow blurred at the edges, as though memory itself refused to cling to him properly. He approached slowly. Casually. As if greeting old friends. "You're newer than you look," he said, voice smooth as water over stones. The boy and girl tensed instinctively. He smiled. "No need for alarm," he said, setting the satchel down between them with a soft thud. "I'm not here to take. I'm here to offer." The girl, the one who had been Lena, narrowed her eyes. "Offer what?" The man opened the satchel with a slow, reverent motion. Inside were dozens of objects. A cracked watch, its hands spinning backward. A locket with no picture inside. A small music box that clicked like bone when wound. A faded book with no title. A photograph torn clean through the middle. Each object pulsed faintly in the dim light. Each one smelled faintly of burnt leaves and candle wax. Memories. Captured. Trapped. Preserved. The man withdrew a folded piece of parchment. He held it out to them between 2 thin fingers. On its surface, written in spidery ink, were 2 names. Tobias Calder. Lena Calder. The boy felt his breath catch. The names had weight. Like anchors tossed into a stormy sea. Without knowing why, he ached to reach for it. "I collect what's left behind," the man said softly. Echoes. Names. Faces. Things the hollow forgets, but the world remembers. He tilted his head. "And I can return them to you. Piece by piece." The girl hesitated. Her fingers twitched toward the parchment. "But at what cost?" she whispered. The man smiled wider. "No malice. No kindness. Only certainty. Everything has a price," he said. "Yours is simple, accept what you were. Accept what you lost, and bear the hunger stain again." The boy flinched. The girl's eyes hardened. They understood. To reclaim their memories was to reopen the wound the witch had left behind. The hunger was gone. Collapsed. But if they pulled the past back into themselves, the hollow might awaken again. And the hunger with it. The man rose, brushing non-existent dust from his coat. He tucked the parchment back into the satchel. But not before leaving behind one object at their feet. A small mirror. Cracked at the center. The girl saw her reflection ripple across it, not her face now, but her younger self. Laughing. Alive. Whole. "I'll be around," the man said. "And when you're tired of being hollow, you know where to find me." He disappeared into the mist without another word. No footprints left behind. No echo of breath. The boy and girl sat there in the growing dusk, the cracked mirror between them. The whispering trees seemed to hold their breath, waiting for a decision. They were free. But freedom was a kind of hunger too. And somewhere deep in their chests, where memory used to live, a tiny seed of longing began to grow. Chapter 19, The Seeds of Memory. Night fell heavy over the town. The boy and girl sat in their dim room, the cracked mirror resting between them on the old wooden table. Neither had spoken for hours. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was weighted, thick with indecision, longing, and dread. The boy turned the mirror over in his hands. The back was engraved with a faint symbol. 3 crescent moons, nearly worn away by time. A signature. Not of the witch. Of the hollow itself, the curse they had broken. But not erased. He caught glimpses in the mirror's cracks. A boy with laughing eyes. A girl chasing fireflies. A home with ivy crawling up the stones. A woman's voice, singing an old lullaby. He could almost taste it. Memory. Self. Belonging. The girl finally spoke, her voice low. "Who are we, if we're no one?" The boy didn't answer immediately. He stared into the broken glass, feeling the tug, the sick, beautiful ache of wanting to be known again. But with that ache came a deeper knowledge. They hadn't just sacrificed memories to starve the hunger. They had severed their place in the bloodline. Their place in the world's story. They existed now outside of memory. Ghosts wearing living flesh. And reclaiming what they lost could invite everything they had defeated back into the cracks. The girl leaned back, arms crossed tightly. "I miss them," she whispered. The boy looked up. "Miss who?" She shook her head, a faint, heartbroken smile on her lips. "I don't even know anymore." The mirror on the table hummed softly. Later that night, restless and half-sick with indecision, the boy left the inn and wandered the empty streets. The town was darker than usual. The street lamps burned low, their light struggling against a mist that seemed to bleed from the stones themselves. And in the windows of the houses, he saw them. Shadowed faces. Watching. Waiting. People who should have been strangers. Yet somehow he knew them. In the way a dream is half remembered on waking. At the edge of the town square, he found a shop he hadn't seen before. No name over the door. Just a single flickering lantern in the window. Inside, he saw shelves lined with relics. Locks of hair in glass jars. Pieces of broken jewelry. Torn pages from forgotten books. Toys missing their owners. All humming faintly. All alive with memory. Standing behind the counter was the memory collector. The man with the blurred face. Smiling thinly. "You came," he said, as if it had been inevitable. He placed a small black box on the counter. Pushed it toward the boy. "Inside is the key," he said. "One memory. One door. Choose carefully." The boy's fingers brushed the lid. A shock ran through him. He saw a flash of a boy sitting by a fire. A hand on his shoulder. A voice calling a name he almost knew. He yanked his hand back, heart pounding. The collector chuckled softly. "No rush. But know this," he leaned closer. "There are others waking, too." The boy frowned. "Others?" The collector nodded. Other hollow-born. Other bloodlines touched by old pacts and older hungers. You're not the only ones who chose to forget. He smiled wider, a crack appearing in his blurred face. And not all of them are content to stay lost. The lantern flickered violently. For a split second, the boy saw dozens of reflections in the window. People like him. Hollow. Wandering. Some already pulling memories back into themselves. One drop at a time. And behind them, something darker. The hunger. Faint. Flickering. But not dead. Waiting. The boy stumbled back from the shop, heart hammering. The door slammed shut behind him without touch. The streets twisted strangely underfoot. The mist thickened. The town was no longer a refuge. It was a crossroads. And he and the girl were at its center. When he returned to the inn, she was sitting on the floor, the cracked mirror cradled in her lap. Her eyes met his. No words passed between them. They both knew. The decision had to be made. Soon. Because the longer they delayed, the stronger the pull became. The stronger it became. And somewhere, buried in the earth beneath Stonewood Hollow, the faintest tremor passed through the bones of the world. The first stirrings of an old hunger, awakening. Chapter 20, The Last Choice. The mirror between them shimmered. Not with light. With possibility. Each fracture across the glass whispered. You were someone. You loved. You lost. You belonged. And if they simply reached forward, if they took back what was offered, the hollow space inside would fill. Names. Faces. Dreams. Pain. Joy. Self. The girl, the one who had once been Lena, ran her fingers along the jagged edge of the mirror. Her reflection fractured, showing dozens of versions of herself. A girl laughing at a birthday party. A young woman burying a secret. A shadowed figure weeping beneath a thorn tree. I'm tired, she said softly. The boy, the one who had once been Tobias, nodded. So am I. They sat in silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the inn's old clock. Somewhere outside, in the sleeping town, a clock tower chimed once. Midnight. A threshold. The boy stood and picked up the cracked mirror. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in his hands. Alive. Hungry. I saw something tonight, he said. He told her about the memory collector. The shop. The box. The glimpse of others like them, wandering the edges of existence, struggling with the same unbearable choice. They're waking up, he said. Others who fed the hollow once. Others who forgot to survive. He gripped the mirror tighter. And some of them are choosing to remember. The girl's hands trembled slightly in her lap. If we take it back, she whispered, we could become ourselves again. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. But if we do, the hollow could open again. The boy nodded. It's not dead. His voice was low. Heavy. It's waiting. Waiting for one of us to want too much. They stared at each other. Across the cracked mirror. Across the chasm where their old selves had lived. Was memory worth the risk of waking the hunger again? Was identity worth devouring the world a second time? Finally, the girl spoke, not all hollow things are broken. Her voice was steady now. Clear. Some things are hollow to be free. The boy smiled. A real, small smile. Then we choose. Together, they lifted the mirror. And without hesitation, without regret, they shattered it against the floor. The mirror exploded into shards of light and sound. For one terrible moment, the memories they had abandoned screamed around them. The mother's lullaby. The laughter. The tears. The names. All trying to force their way back in. The boy staggered back, clutching his head. The girl gasped, falling to her knees. But they resisted. They held on to the emptiness they had chosen. The freedom. The world shuddered. Outside, the mist that had coiled through the town lifted, unraveling like smoke in the wind. The lights brightened. The streets straightened. The walls stopped whispering. And deep beneath Stonewood Hollow, a faint, furious wail echoed once, then fell silent forever. The hunger was starved. Truly. Completely. Because it could not feed on what no longer existed. Tobias Calder. Lena Calder. They were gone. Names with no holders. Memories with no homes. They had chosen to be hollow. And in doing so, had won a kind of victory no sword or spell could achieve. The boy and girl sat together in the wreckage of the broken mirror. No words passed between them. No need. They understood. Not through memory. Not through history. Through the simple, breathtaking fact of being alive. Whole in their hollowness, they rose together. Left the inn. Stepped into the clean, dawn-bright street. And walked toward a life unwritten. No past. No curse. Only possibility. But far away, in a forgotten corner of the ruined hollow, a sliver of a sliver of a sliver of hunger still waited. Chapter 21, The Collector's New Game. Far from the little town where two hollow souls walked free. In the ashes of Stonewood Hollow. Beneath dead trees and splintered stones, a figure moved. The memory collector stood at the ruins of the hollow's entrance. The earth was cracked. The roots severed. The offering stone split into a jagged, meaningless wound in the ground. The hunger was silent. Starved. Folded into the cold nothingness Tobias and Lena had chosen. The collector crouched and ran his fingers through the dust, lifting a small handful. He let it sift through his pale hands, watching it drift like dead snow. His face, still blurred at the edges, still ungraspable, tightened. Not in grief. In calculation. He pulled a silver locket from the folds of his coat. Inside was a sliver of a memory, a girl in a red dress. Spinning, laughing, before her face blurred into mist. Not Tobias. Not Lena. Another. Forgotten long ago. The collector smiled thinly. "You think you've won," he said aloud, his voice smooth and heavy with amusement. He tucked the locket away. "But the world is stitched with cracks. And hunger always finds new seams." He rose and turned from the ruined hollow. Ahead, stretched across the landscape, were towns. Villages. Cities. Places full of names. Faces. Memories. Not all cursed. Not all hunted. But all vulnerable. Because humanity had a flaw deeper than any curse. They wanted to remember. He would no longer wait for Hollowborn to come to him. He would go to them. He would whisper in their ears. Offer them back their pain. Their joy. Their precious, bleeding pasts. Piece by piece. Price by price. Until they offered themselves willingly. The collector reached a crossroads where four dusty roads met. No signs. No names. He chose a path at random. Not because it mattered. Everywhere was ripe. At the crossroads, the mist stirred once. Briefly. And from the ground where he had stood, something grew. A flower of blackened thorns. Twisting toward the sky. A seed. Planted not by the hunger. But by something older. Hungrier. A new covenant waiting to be written. Meanwhile, in the town where the boy and girl now lived. The wind carried strange sounds some nights. The clicking of music boxes. The ticking of watches spinning backward. The soft sigh of forgotten names brushing against the windows. They did not hear it yet. But others did. A child on the outskirts of town dreamed of a red tree growing from the floor of her bedroom. An old man woke in the night, weeping for a daughter he never remembered losing. A woman found a mirror in an antique shop, cracked exactly down the center, whispering promises of faces she had long since forgotten. The world was stirring. Not in rage. Not in hunger. In longing. And longing, the collector knew, was always the first crack in the dam. He smiled to himself and vanished into the mist. His satchel heavier with the scent of waiting names. The game had changed. But it had not ended. Chapter 22, Maren and the Mirror. Maren Holt didn't believe in curses. She believed in broken things. Broken clocks, broken hearts, broken towns where hope leaked out faster than rainwater through a cracked roof. She lived on the edge of the same town Tobias and Lena now called home, though she had never met them. Her world was small. A crumbling second-floor apartment over an abandoned bookstore. A job sweeping floors in a diner where the jukebox played songs no one remembered requesting. Evenings spent walking the cracked sidewalks, chasing some feeling she couldn't quite name. It was on one of those restless walks that she found the shop. Or rather, the shop found her. At the farthest end of Main Street, past boarded-up storefronts and empty houses, stood a door she swore hadn't been there yesterday. Its paint peeled in long strips. The windows were dust-choked. But the golden light glowing faintly behind the glass called to her like an old lullaby half-remembered. Maren hesitated. Then, almost without thinking, she pushed open the door. A bell above her head chimed once, though no bell was visible. The inside of the shop was shadowed and close, smelling of candle wax, old wood, and something sharper, something like memory itself. Shelves crammed with relics loomed all around. Faded photographs. Broken watches. Rings missing their stones. A child's shoe, worn to the sole. And at the center of it all, a mirror. It leaned against the far wall. Tall. Cracked exactly down the middle. Its surface shimmered slightly, as though catching light from a source Maren couldn't see. When she looked into it, her breath caught. Because she saw herself. But not as she was. She saw a version of herself she didn't recognize. Laughing freely. Holding someone's hand. Wearing a dress she had never owned. Standing beside a woman with the same eyes, older, smiling proudly. Maren staggered back. Her heart raced. Tears sprang to her eyes, unbidden. She didn't know these memories. But she missed them. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice from the shadows. She whirled. A man emerged from the darkness behind the counter. Thin. Pale. Wearing a long, weathered coat. His face blurred at the edges, like a figure on the verge of waking from a dream. Maren struggled to find her voice. I was just looking. The man smiled, patient and understanding. Of course. That's what it's here for. He gestured toward the mirror. To help you remember. I don't. She shook her head. I don't remember anything like that. His smile deepened. Not yet. Maren stared at the mirror again. The image shifted. A small, sunlit kitchen. A man lifting her onto his shoulders, spinning her in circles. A lullaby sung in a language she didn't know she knew. Each glimpse burrowed deeper. Each whisper made her heart ache with a longing that was raw and real. "You've lost something," the man said gently. "Something precious. Wouldn't you like it back?" Maren pressed a hand to her chest. Her heartbeat thudded painfully. Yes. God, yes. She didn't even know what she had lost. But she wanted it back more fiercely than she wanted anything else. The man reached into his coat and produced a small slip of paper. On it was written a single word, Maren. He held it out to her. No threats. No demands. Only an invitation. A door she could walk through freely. One signature, he said softly. One promise to remember. Maren's hand hovered over the paper. The pen was already waiting. Warm in her palm. The mirror reflected her reaching. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice, a memory of a memory, screamed in warning. Don't. Names are chains. Remembering costs more than forgetting. But it was so small. So easy. One signature. And she would be whole again. Wouldn't she? Maren bit her lip, heart hammering. The man said nothing. He only smiled. Waiting. Patient as stone. Patient as hunger. And outside the shop, down the crooked streets, the mist began to rise once more. Soft. Silent. Hungry. Chapter 23, The Ink That Bleeds. The pen trembled between Maren's fingers. The paper sat before her on the counter, smooth, pale, harmless. Her name was written at the top in delicate, perfect handwriting. Maren. Just that. No threats. No contracts written in blood. Only her name. Waiting to be claimed. Behind her, the cracked mirror shimmered. Every heartbeat, it flashed new visions. A man and a woman dancing in a living room, laughter spilling through the dusk. A little girl blowing out candles on a cake, her cheeks flushed with joy. A voice calling, Maren. Come inside. It's getting late. Maren's eyes burned. Her whole body ached with the need to belong to something. To remember love. To remember being wanted. The memory collector watched silently, hands folded neatly before him. There was no urgency in him. Only certainty. As though he knew, everyone eventually signs. The pen hovered. For the barest second, Maren caught something, a ripple in the mirror's reflection. The laughing woman behind her, no longer smiled. Her face twisted. Melted into something long and hollow-eyed. Something stitched with shadows. Something that watched Maren not with love, but with hunger. Maren gasped and stepped back. The mirror flickered. The images smoothed again, perfect, comforting. But the crack in the illusion had been revealed. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. Why? She whispered. Her voice sounded too small, too young. Why do you want me to remember? The collector tilted his head slightly, a predator studying an uncertain meal. Because you were never meant to be hollow. His smile widened, patient and cruel. You are meant to feed the space you left behind. The word struck her like a blow. Feed. Not heal. Not reclaim. Feed. She staggered back another step. No, she said, voice cracking. You're lying. The collector's smile didn't fade. He simply gestured to the paper again. Then don't sign. He shrugged lightly. Stay broken. Stay hollow. Stay nothing. Behind her, the mirror whispered louder now. It whispered promises. It whispered her mother's voice. It whispered a name she had forgotten since she was 6 years old. It whispered home. Tears slid down Maren's face. "I want it back," she sobbed. Her fingers clutched the edge of the counter hard enough to make her knuckles pale. The collector said nothing. Only waited. The pen lay before her. The mirror shimmered. The memories danced and twisted. With a shuddering breath, Maren made her choice. She dropped the pen. It clattered against the counter and rolled to the floor. The sound echoed through the dusty shop like a gunshot. "No," she whispered. "No." For a long moment, the collector simply stood there. Then he sighed, a slow, soft, almost regretful sound. "You'll regret that," he said. The cracked mirror behind her shattered. The images bled away into the mist. Gone. Erased. Maren staggered as something inside her chest burned. The fierce, scouring pain of loss made permanent. The possibility of remembering, of belonging, torn away forever. The collector smiled again. But this time, it was thinner. Colder. "I'll see you again," he said simply. "And next time." His blurred face shifted slightly, becoming sharper. Older. Hungrier. "Next time, you'll beg me to take you." He turned and disappeared into the mist coiling at the back of the shop. Gone. Like he had never been. Maren stood alone. Shaking. Empty. But free. For now. Outside, the town stirred. New doors opened where none had been before. Mirrors gleamed behind dusty glass. Whispers coiled through the autumn air. The hunger was dead. But the echo of it, the need to belong, the longing for memory, lived on. Waiting. Maren stumbled out of the shop and into the street. Above her, the mist was already bleeding into the dawn. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, head down, and walked. One step. Then another. Into the long, uncertain road ahead. Chapter 24, The Roots That Remember. Maren couldn't sleep. The night after she fled the shop, she lay curled in her small upstairs apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling as the wind howled through the streets like it knew her name. The broken mirror from the collector's shop haunted her memory. It hadn't just reflected images of the past. It had seen her. And now it was gone. Smashed into 1,000 shards the moment she refused to become a vessel for the hollow again. She had expected relief. Instead, she felt unraveled. The ache of what might have been clung to her like wet cloth. She kept touching her chest, expecting to feel something torn open. But there was only skin. And a strange warmth beneath it, like something recently removed that had left its imprint behind. By dawn, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked. Through town. Past the diner. Past the post office. No one greeted her. People she'd spoken to every day now looked through her, like they knew something had changed but couldn't say what. Or maybe they could. And they were afraid to speak it aloud. The shop was gone. Where it had been, nothing but boarded windows and ivy-stained brick. No sign of dust, or glass, or shattered memory. Only a small iron flower blooming from the cracks in the sidewalk. Black petals. Thorns made of rust. That smelled like burnt herbs and blood. Maren knelt and touched it. The petals quivered. And a whisper, no louder than a breath behind her ear, crept through the morning wind. "It's not over." She recoiled and backed into the street, heart hammering. Someone was watching her. Not the collector. Something older. That night, she dreamed. Not of family, or laughter, or a forgotten past. She dreamed of roots. Twisting through soil, pulsing with stolen memory. She saw herself buried beneath them, alive, awake, hollowed out from within. And above her, the sky bled red. A woman stood on the horizon, cloaked in black vines, her hands dripping with ink and names. Not the witch. Not the collector. Something new. Maren woke in a sweat, lungs aching, throat dry. On her windowpane, etched in dew and fog, were 3 crescent moons. Chained together. She wasn't free. Not really. She had severed the bargain. Refused the memory. But the cost of refusal had left a mark. The hunger was gone. But the collector was planting something else in its place. A new covenant. Fed not by memory, but by regret. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror by her bed. For a moment, she saw another version of herself standing there. One who had signed the paper. One who remembered everything. One who smiled. And wept. And bled. Maren touched the mirror's surface. It was cold. But not lifeless. Something was waking. Not inside the glass. Inside her. Chapter 25, The Door Beyond the Hollow. The next night, Maren didn't dream. She remembered. Not her own life, not the laughter and love the collector had tempted her with. She remembered something else. Black trees growing from broken spines. Names being peeled from tongues like skin. A hunger deeper than memory, deeper than blood. A voice speaking from a place beneath even the hollow. Something that had been waiting. When she woke, the air in her apartment was different. Thicker. The shadows clung to the corners like cobwebs, and her breath came out in white mist, even though the room was warm. On the cracked mirror by her bed, a new symbol had appeared overnight. A spiral, broken at the center. Leaking black veins across the glass. She pressed a trembling hand to it. The glass vibrated against her skin. And in a voice that wasn't hers, wasn't human, the mirror whispered. The hollow was never the root. Only the first gate. Maren stumbled back, heart slamming against her ribs. The collector hadn't failed. Not entirely. He hadn't needed her to sign. He had only needed her to see. To carry the seed forward. She fled the apartment, slipping into the empty streets. The town was quiet, but wrong. Doors hung ajar. Lights flickered erratically. The mist rose from the pavement in strange, writhing shapes. And in the center of the town square, where once there had been nothing, now stood a door. Freestanding. Made of rotted wood banded with black iron. Its surface was carved with endless spirals, thorned moons, and unfamiliar symbols that crawled when she looked directly at them. No hinges. No handle. Only a crack at the center. Leaking mist like breath. Around the door, the townspeople gathered. Silent. Still. Eyes empty. Waiting. Maren stumbled forward, drawn against her will. She caught flashes in their faces. Tobias called her, frozen in a memory he could no longer recall. Lena called her, staring through time with hollow eyes. Other faces she didn't recognize but somehow knew, echoes from bloodlines lost to time and curse. All of them caught. Suspended. Feeding something larger. Above the door, carved into the stone lintel, were 3 words. The second hunger. Maren's stomach twisted. The hollow had been an infant. A larva. A single hungry mouth learning to feed. This was the second mouth. Older. Vaster. Patient enough to let one curse die in order to birth another. The memory collector stood beside the door. No satchel now. No polite smile. Only his true face, thin and endless, eyes black pits gnawed by endless longing. He did not speak. He simply raised his hand and pointed at the door. The crack widened. A sliver of deeper dark within. A voice slithered out of it, Maren Holt. You refused remembrance. Now refuse existence. The mist curled around her ankles. The pull was gentle, almost loving. But it would not stay gentle for long. Maren backed away. No, she whispered. I won't. The collector's blurred form rippled. He took a step closer. And all around her, the townspeople smiled. Their faces cracking at the seams, as if trying to tear themselves into something new. The collector spoke at last. You saw. You carried. You belong. Maren turned and ran. Away from the door. Away from the mist. Away from the second hunger gnawing its way through the cracks in reality. Behind her, the mist thickened. The door pulsed once, twice, like a colossal heart preparing to open wide. Maren didn't look back. She fled into the forest at the edge of town, where the mist hadn't yet touched. Where the old magic of the earth still lived. She didn't know where she was running. Or who would help her. But she knew this, she would not feed them. She would not open the door. Not without a fight. Far behind her, in the heart of the mist. The door cracked wider, and something smiled in the dark. Waiting.
The story may end here. But the darkness never sleeps. Like this video to keep the shadows stirring. Share your whispers in the comments, your voice shapes the next nightmare. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Gothic Hour Stories and Mysteries. Where every tale lingers, and every soul leaves a mark, the Gothic Hour awaits.